Hey, what's going on, roleplayers? It's the Bard here. Welcome back to the corner. Today I thought we'd try something a little bit different. This is part one of an adventure that you might like to run for your Call of Cthulhu players. Feel free to add to or take away from this as much as you like. The idea is here just to give you a basic overview of something you could do if you're stuck for a game, or perhaps you just need a little bit of inspiration. If you're in need of any clues or props for your game, you'll find them in the video description. And with that being said, let's get started. So your Call of Cthulhu adventure can take place any way you want it to, but you don't necessarily have to worry about a place that you can describe really accurately. What would be more important is if you can describe it in such a way that it looks vibrant, that it feels alive. If it's a city environment, is it close to a river? Are there busy roads? How densely populated is it? Does it have massive skyscrapers, or is it just small office buildings? If it's a rural environment, are there farmsteads? Are there many fields? Are there nearby woodlands? Things that really bring the scenario to life. Be sure to give special consideration to your environment when you're planning your game. You want to make it as realistic and immersive as possible. That way the players feel like they're really part of a world around them and not just spectators. Something that will also be very beneficial to you is if when you go for your character creation, you take everyone through a very in-depth process. If you have them write combined backstories that explain how they know each other, that would be a very good and very solid way of bringing your characters together. What will also be a good idea is, in this particular scenario, is if when they're writing their backstories, have them include the sample character that you've created. This will be important and necessary for the story. There's a sample character you can use in the description below. The sample character has an in-depth description as well as a detailed array of skills. There are also a number of potential ideas if your players are struggling to come up with a reason as to why they might know this person or how to include them into their history. The reason for writing the sample character into the players' histories is to make them seem more real, to make them seem more alive, to make them seem like someone they actually know or have some kinship with, or they feel something for in some way, so that when the game kicks off, it's a more realistic scenario. In fact, if you wanted to, you could take the sample character and put them into your next adventure if you're not planning on running this one straight away. That way, it gives the players some experience with the sample character and allows them to build up a rapport with them, so that when this adventure actually starts, there's a little bit more natural and consistent emotion coming from the players. The sample character. Jennifer is closely acquainted with all the investigators. She's smart, successful, and a reclusive member of the community. Jennifer is a talented and passionate anthropologist in her late 30s, somewhat plain to look at, with large steel-rimmed spectacles, pale eyes, and neatly tied hair. Jennifer has had a small number of articles published in respected anthropological journals and was once invited to a speaker's colloquial on lost civilizations, her area of specialty. The investigators begin the adventure at Jennifer's funeral, a closed casket affair. None of the investigators have seen the body. After the service, possibly a week or so, each investigator receives a letter informing them of Jennifer's last wishes, along with a coach ticket and a key. The investigators are to travel to the listed address in order to attend the reading of her will. During the coach ride, the investigators have an ideal opportunity to go into any specific details about their characters in order to give more depth to their personalities. Besides the vicar, the investigators are the only ones at Jennifer's funeral. A successful spot hidden roll will reveal, while reading the eulogy, the vicar looks to be evaluating the investigators when he thinks they're not looking. For those who made that spot hidden roll, a psychology ×2 roll will indicate the vicar looks uncomfortable around the investigators the longer the eulogy takes. After the funeral, should anyone decide to read their letter, it reads as follows. Dear, whatever the investigator's name is, This is to inform you that the last will and testament of Jennifer Wilkes-Holt, or whatever sample character you choose, will be read on whatever date your adventure is set at Eveline Bell's bed and breakfast at whatever town or state you wish to set your adventure in. While this may seem like an unusual venue to hold a reading of a will, please understand that Madame Bell was a trusted confidant of Ms Wilkes-Holt and trusted her with a significant number of correspondences and personal effects, many of which have been bequeathed to you. It is Ms Wilkes-Holt's wish that no other person or persons be present during this reading, aside from Madame Bell and myself acting as Ms Wilkes-Holt's solicitor, who have been instructed to preside over the reading. Please remember to bring some form of identification so you can verify who you are and that you are the intended recipient. Most importantly, you are to bring the enclosed key as partial proof of your entitlement and in order to have access to your inheritance. No doubt by now, after the funeral, it's far too late for the investigators to be getting any kind of transport to their next destination. It might be beneficial to have them stay somewhere within the local town. This will be good because you can then have them experience the townsfolk a little bit, who they'll find are very off with them. There's just something not quite right about the townspeople. No one seems to be willing to speak to the player characters, or at the very least they offer them the bare minimum of answers. In fact, most people cross the street to avoid them, or some people will actively tell them that they want them out of their town if they're feeling hostile or aggressive. This is something you can use to instantly set the player characters on edge. In fact, it might even be worth including because, as the adventure progresses, the reasons for people's hostility towards the investigators is going to become more and more apparent, providing, of course, the investigators are smart enough to uncover the clues that you've left for them. Scene 2 takes place at Madame Bell's bed and breakfast on the outskirts of town. It will have been a long journey for the investigators and they'll have to spend the night. In the morning, the will be read. After its conclusion, the player characters will be presented with locked boxes. When they open up each box, it will contain a clue. Some sample clues I've provided for you are an address with a room key for the Overview Hotel just outside of Arkham, the classic Lovecraft setting if that's what you want to use, room number 22. The second clue I provided for you, a fragment of nonsense text. This fragment might be a piece of a larger mythos work perhaps. This will be explained later in the game. Perhaps you'll have a different idea than what I've had, but feel free to use what you want. Another clue, a green crystal about the size of a wine bottle. It's cool to the touch and has an eerie kind of glow about it. And finally, a medical certificate of mental health with Jennifer's name on it. When the investigators arrive at Madame Bell's, you should play up her sense of sadness and loss at Jennifer's passing. Jennifer, it seems, was a long-time tenant who had a permanent room here. On many occasions, you could imply that Mrs. Bell and Jennifer had deep discussions and a very strong friendship. Again, this will help to cement the idea of a real person in the characters' minds, to give your players a very distinct sense of a close, very firm friendship between the people involved in the game. In the morning, after the reading at Mrs. Bell's, she pulls the investigators to one side. She is concerned about her most loyal tenant's fate. She wonders if the investigators can do some digging around, for reasons she'd rather not go into. She believes the local police are not likely to try too hard to find out what happened to Jennifer. In order to help the players with their investigation, Madame Bell shows them to Jennifer's room. Madame Bell has never been inside this room, as part of the agreement in hiring it was that no one enter it for any reason. However, now that Jennifer is dead, she feels that if anyone's going to help find out what happened to her friend, perhaps there will be some clues in her bedroom. No one has seen the inside of this room for months, not even Mrs. Bell. Jennifer's room at Mrs. Bell's contains many of her anthropological notes and newspaper articles. It's well kept, although her desk is a little bit messy, with a number of newspapers, books, and various pieces of information scattered across it. Some successful library use roles can reveal the following. Number 1. Newspaper from 2 years ago. A house belonging to a strange cult thought to believe in creatures from other worlds has been raided by local authorities last night. Until recently, the city was content to let them go about their business of chanting in the night and performing heathen sermons. However, after the body of a local university student was found in the woodlands surrounding the old house, police and federal agents raided the decaying manor home, seizing all related literature pertaining to the cult's activities. Only 4 individuals were killed in the inevitable shootout, all of whom were cult followers. Many other cult followers were arrested and have been taken to the local jail and will undoubtedly face the rest of their life in a psychiatric asylum. Some of the cultists did manage to escape, however. The location and numbers of these individuals remains unknown. Number 2. Newspaper from 7 months ago. The body of a local man was found in foothills outside the city. His brain appears to have been removed and his body preserved in a ceremony reminiscent of the funeral rites used by the ancient Egyptians. However, the methods used seem to vary greatly from the ancient death rituals of the East. Number 3. Newspaper from 5 months ago. A man walking his dog through the hills has stumbled across the skeletal remains of a number of unidentified individuals. Supposedly, the man's dog had gotten off his lead and squeezed itself through a boulder-covered gap after it had caught an unusual scent. The man, seeing his dog disappear into the surrounding undergrowth, gave chase and pulled back the foliage to reveal the boulder. The man was quoted as saying, "It was so well hidden amidst the undergrowth that nobody would think to search for it there. It could have gone undiscovered for centuries. It was pure chance that I found it." After the boulder was pulled aside and the man reported smelling the stench of decay and rot coming from the alcove, the small hole led down into a large chamber. The cave was said to be filled with bodies, curious painted sigils, and a number of interesting carvings and sculptures that resemble artifacts from documented ancient civilizations. I couldn't stay there seeing all that stuff. I grabbed my hand by the collar and hauled him out of the caves. I ran as fast as possible to my house, whereupon I telephoned the police immediately. The police investigation into the remains found in the hill is currently underway. Number 4. Newspaper from 4 months ago. Charlie Ruby, local man famed for discovering what has become known as the Cultist's Cavern, was discovered wandering the streets, babbling incoherently about visitors from the skies and secrets of the universe. The only piece of coherent information that could be extracted from him was that he had taken a manuscript from the site and not told anyone of its existence. Police searched his home, but no such manuscript was discovered. It is thought that Mr. Ruby will spend the rest of his days within the white walls of the sanitarium. Anthropology roles. Should the players make several successful anthropology rolls, the players can discover thus. 1. A sculpture on Jennifer's desk depicts a small loop which could be looked through, and the reflective surface from behind it would show one's reflection on an alien landscape. The sculpture represents pyramids aligned to the stars. 2. A stone tablet from Dark Age England. It depicts an armoured knight doing battle with a dragon. 3. An old urn, once used as a container to store the ancient pharaoh's organs before mummification. Once all the questions have been answered and all the investigations completed, the investigators will have ample time to gather up any personal effects they might want, gather up their clues, collect any items from town, although people won't be willing to engage in conversation with them. Now's a good time to get your players moving forward with the investigations and really get into the heart of the adventure. On the trip from the rural area outside of town where Mrs. Bell's B&B sits, the investigators will find themselves travelling an old dirt road through the woods. Partway to the hotel, the investigators will be set upon by another vehicle. The assailants will try to shoot out the tyres on the investigators' vehicle. 10% is probably a reasonable chance to succeed. If the investigators try to do the same thing during the chase, then it should be at half the selected shooting skill, though it was earlier advised that the investigators would do better not to have guns in the first place. After 2 to 3 rounds of shooting, the driver will attempt to run the investigators off the road. Use the resistance table to determine success. If the investigators succeed at shooting the driver, or instead forcing them off the road, the vehicle rolls down the hill to hit a rock or a tree and then bursts into flames, engulfing the bodies and charred them beyond recognition. If the investigators are forced off the road, the vehicle rolls and the investigators each take 1d6 damage. If you want to have the scene drag out a little, then you could have the pursuers search for the investigators, whose best bet for escape may be to move silently and stealthily through the woods in an attempt to elude their pursuers. The hotel. The hotel is abandoned, though still in relatively good condition, and the room has not been opened to which the investigators have the key. In the room, they find a sepia photograph of all the investigators, including Jennifer. This should be a clue to the investigators that they will not have any prior experience or knowledge of that night. Nobody knows of the photo being taken. You'll also find a bloodstain on the sheet and torn women's clothing, as well as a copy of thaumaturgical prodigies in the New England Canon. The rules for this can be found in the Call of Cthulhu Player's Handbook. If the investigators decide to search the front desk, then a successful library use roll reveals that they were some of the last people to be registered here before the records abruptly end. Again, the investigators should have no prior knowledge of this place, or have never been here before. If the investigators search the ground floor of the hotel and insist on being thorough, they will eventually enter the function room. Inside is a horrific sight. The mangled bodies of at least a dozen guests strewn around the room, a blood-soaked floor, and unrecognizable symbols painted on the wall in the victims' remains. Well guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. Perhaps it's given you some good ideas to run your own Call of Cthulhu game. Or perhaps you want the completed version of this, in which case I'll be uploading that as soon as I possibly can. In the meantime, thanks for listening, get subscribed, and I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.